A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. This is something I've heard my whole life. And I'm also hearing over the years that women don't need men for families, for kids. They could just adopt or they can just have a baby on their own. They don't need the father. I've heard men say or guys say they don't need a woman. They don't want a woman. They don't want a family. It's usually the woman's side I'm hearing saying basically they want the family, they want the child, but they just don't care about the guy part. They don't want the guy part. The guy's going to do nothing but hurt them. Where the guy's more like, I just want my freedom and I don't really care for the kids. That's usually what I've been hearing. And I want to unpack this. I actually think that there's something deeper going on here. It's not just a strictly selfish thing going on here. I mean, it is, as far as I'm concerned. Living your life just wanting your life for you, I think is selfish, honestly. I think your life should be about a family and children and all that stuff. And, well, if it can't be, it can't be, but you do your best. You should be trying to do that with your life. That should be your goal. You're supposed to, according to religious values, religious ideals, you're supposed to multiply. You're supposed to make babies. That's what you're supposed to do. That's what God actually demands us to do as people. But here's the thing. I'm mentioning God here. In our society, we've lost touch with, in a lot of ways, with God, with religiosity, with all that stuff. We become much more secular. And as we become more secular, we've become more selfish. And we've all been about me, and what I want and what's for me. And it's not anymore about actually serving God. When you're serving God, you're doing something selfless, essentially. You're doing something not for you. It could be for you also. If you're raised, this is what you have to do. You can have an ego with it, and you could just be doing stuff. It could be second nature to you, and you're not actually having humility with it. And you can also live your life from a secular point of view and have humility with it as well. But at the end of the day, I think when there's something, when you believe in God and you're doing things for God, you're connecting yourself to something greater you can't do without that belief. Without that connection to God, you can't have without the God thing. Now, an atheist would argue, there's no God. There's no evidence for God. There's no anything. Okay, so let's pretend that we got a bunch of religious people that are just acting crazy and mentally connecting themselves to something they believe to be greater, and that thing has caused them to have a better life. The truth of the matter is, from an atheist point of view, it doesn't matter, like either way, whether God exists or not, because from an atheist point of view, your life doesn't matter. You live, you die, that's it. You get remembered from people's whose lives they just live and they die. None of it matters ultimately. And if you're living your life to serve God and you get married and your whole thing is about serving God and you're going to do what God wants you to do, what God demands, but you're also serving yourself for God, because that's what you're doing with marriage. I think you're serving yourself for God and you're doing what's good for yourself, for your marriage and all that stuff, but for God. Ultimately, it all connects back to God. You take the God away, it all connects back to you. And I think a big reason a lot of these divorces are happening is because everything goes back to you and goes back to your subjective ways of how you think life should be based off what you feel, essentially, not actually objectively how life should be from, let's say, a religious standpoint, where religiously there's a way of life. You learn through the religion of how to think, how to be. So if I were to get married right now and I was an atheist and I just base everything in my life on what I feel, that can change. And for myself, it has changed. One second I'm going to be for all these secular values. Another second I'm going to be on board with more religious values. Another second I'm going to go back to some other values, pagan values and all these different things. And it's all based off what I feel. And I think we just got... this is just my belief. I believe the divorce rate has gone up because of secularism. I don't think it's because of... And even the religious people have been affected by this. I think even religious people... You might think, but there's all these... The divorce rate's going up in the religious world too. And I'm not going to say no. I'm just going to say that it's because of the secular things embedded in our society now from the secular world and all that stuff that's hurting all of us. Hurting the religious people and hurting the secular people. And ultimately, it's their fault. What they do, you're responsible for your decisions. So ultimately, whatever I do, if I get divorced, if I get married and I get divorced, ultimately that's my fault. That's on me. And if anyone, that's what it is. And you're supposed to have children. You get divorced. I see people celebrating divorce. This is to me an absurd thing. Divorce is tragic. It's not something to be celebrated. Okay, I think I've said this before. But it's the marriage thing. I'm hearing people just talking about the fact that we don't need husbands. We don't need this. We don't need that. And it's all me, me, me. It's not about living your life how, let's say, a God demands you and wants you to live your life, and doing that, as far as I've seen from religious people, is significantly happier, significantly better. And I know there's all these arguments on this, and I can go through all of them. And ultimately, what it comes down to is people are not perfect. People can be religious and mess up, but ultimately, there's something greater that you can connect your life to from a religious standpoint, and something that makes sense objectively for morals from a religious standpoint that you cannot get from the secular world, and you cannot get something to base your life around that's bringing yourself to a place that can cause you and your family and whoever it is to be part of something greater, to make your everything of worth and of value. I know the atheists would also argue, they would say, we don't need any of that stuff. We're better than that, basically, they would say. They wouldn't say it outright, but they'll have that attitude. Like, yeah, we're better than that, or whatever it is. But this marriage thing, I think, is really significant and really important. And if you know anybody, you hear anyone talking about not needing a husband, not needing a wife, not actually, like, they're just going to hurt you, or they're just this, or just get that, like, ask them, what is your purpose in life? What is your goals here? What do you think you're here to be doing? Should you just be existing to make yourself feel good? Is that really what you were made for? Or are you actually supposed to try actually having a family and being of use and of worth? And obviously, you can't question God. Okay, this is something you hear people doing. They say, especially atheists, they will say, this makes no sense with God. It's like, the idea of God doesn't make sense either. Like, you can't make sense of a being that is everything, omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent. You can't make sense of such a being. Yet, you're telling me you're going to make sense of things in life that you can't even, like, begin to comprehend. Can you even begin to comprehend a plan for this world or anything? But you're going to tell me things you can't even make sense out of, make no sense? Nothing makes sense from your point of view. You don't understand anything. And you're out there spouting like you know it all, but this out of everything that you know doesn't make sense. First, explain to me your worldview, how everything within your worldview makes perfect sense, and then come to me and tell me how this thing from the religious worldview makes no sense whatsoever. Okay, that's what I would say to something like that. Anyhow, my point here is very simply about marriage. Marriage is a religious thing, and should be done for God, under God, because God, you believe God wants you to be married and get married, and you want to live your life religiously and all that stuff. That's what I think marriage is all about, what it's for. And if you're going to try doing it outside of that, chances are that's what's causing the divorce rate to go up. That's what's causing marriages to fail. I think that if you're wherever you're holding spiritually, if you're a secular, whatever that means to you, if you can understand that, I'm not sure, but spiritually, whatever that means to you, whatever that is, whatever level you're on, you're with someone and you're able to grow with someone spiritually, connecting to this greater thing that from an atheist point of view, it can just all be in your head and you being crazy. So be crazy with someone else together, I suppose, and be connected to this thing that actually provides objective morality and things that make sense for your life and a way of life and all that stuff, connecting to God, and live your life doing that, rather than the other side would basically just be anything you want, which is chaotic and crazy and not something that's beneficial for society or good in any way. The arguments you would hear from atheists and all that stuff is basically religious people are just bad and they're wrong and they don't, the whole thing doesn't make any sense and they're just a bunch of crazy people. Okay, so let me be a crazy person and do the stuff, and let me actually live a life that I can actually make sense out of, and you live your life that you can't actually make sense out of, because it's literally impossible. I'd love for an atheist to prove to me how you can actually make sense out of life, your existence, or anything to make any sense for you, that morality matters or anything matters. I know all the arguments. They'll say, don't do unto others as you don't want done to you, or don't do unto others you don't want done to you, or whatever it is. They'll say all the platitudes, but at the end of the day, none of it matters from an atheist point of view, because you just live and you die, and then you're done. And what's the difference what happened to you through that life? You're done. It doesn't matter. You could have gone around and raped all the women, and you could have stolen from everybody, and you could have killed 1 million people, but then you're dead, and okay, now life moves on for nothing. Anyhow, like, subscribe, share, join me on my Facebook group, America and Values. All the best. Thanks for watching.